Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the Premier League from A to B. My name's Brian. I'm the B in the A to B, and I'm here with my co-host Andy, who's the A in A to B.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And we're here talking because we like to do some some talking about the Premier League. And most of the time, you can't. There's no visuals, but this time you can see me, and it will be delightful.
Everyone can see
E.
Brian. Woohoo!
Yeah. So that's my ABC pun. You told me I need to work on the intro. I thought that was a little bit better. So, um, yeah. So we're gonna, as you know, you've probably listened before. You probably know our opinions. We're just gonna go over what we predicted at the beginning of the year, talk about what's going on in the Premier League right now, and give predictions for the rest of the year. We all want to do our traditional first shout out to Marlon Harrison and now our favorite MLS team, Minnesota
Go
United.
Marlon.
Go Loons. They have Marlon Harrison, and they have former Louisville City FC keeper Greg Ranjitsingh on there now. So I got two different representations on the same team, U of L and Louisville City, plus close to my heart, and Arsenal, obviously. As you can see, my Arsenal jersey. I'm wearing an Eduardo jersey, funny enough. Um,
Always the Eduardo jersey.
I love Eduardo. That just one of my favorite Arsenal players of all time. Should have been fantastic if it wasn't for one tackle. You would have had one less title too if it wasn't for one tackle, and Arsenal would have one more. But that's neither here nor there. That's revisionist history. Um, but yeah, Vito Manone, love Vito. Just super seems like a super nice dude. I saw him get beat 5-1 at the Emirates one day, and like he was just going after the game. He wasn't even like upset or mad. I'm sure he was upset overall, but he was just happy to see friends after the game and talk and really do his thing. So yeah, that's kind of where we're starting. I mean, we go over the accomplishments of the year. The University of Louisville women's program was really good this year. They made the NCAA tournament. The men's program was one win away from probably making the Final Four. Honestly, they got crushed by Georgetown in the Sweet 16, but Georgetown ended up winning the whole thing. So congratulations to both those teams. Two fantastic seasons. Obviously, Louisville City, outside of some office issues, has had a great season and a fantastic off season. Just making the right moves, going to the stadium coming up, and that's really about it. Outside of U of L signed the perfect named soccer player of all time. His name is Yaya Diaby. Yaya Diaby. He sounds like the best midfielder of all time. He's a defensive end. Just, I don't get it. But that's for me. That's all I got. Seattle won the MLS Cup, which is my personal soccer thing. I didn't get to go. I almost went because it's Seattle's 2 hours, or it's like a 3 hour flight, $150 to get to Seattle. So it wasn't expensive, but hotel tickets and flight were like $1,500 combined because flight wasn't expensive, but hotels were super expensive, and then tickets to the game were like $400 a piece, which is like near Super Bowl levels, which is insane. Like that shows you how when in the healthy cities and your Seattle's, your Atlanta's, your Portland's, MLS is still like a top tier league. It may not be the reason it's not top tier is not those cities. They'd be willing to put the money in you get in the EPL, maybe not the EPL, but like higher than the SPL, higher than a lot of those tier two leagues in Europe. If all the teams were as popular as you are in the big cities, but yeah, Seattle, great win. I'm super excited. Got to see one of my favorite bands afterwards. It was just a really good day. Um, Andy, outside of the ones I've mentioned, because those are kind of our combination soccer stuff, how's your soccer life going?
I guess as expected. I mean, we did mention Louisville City. That was well above expectations, as far as their finish for the season. But pretty much everything else is kind of as expected. The teams that I thought would suck in MLS ended up sucking, and I didn't really necessarily lose interest, but I had a lot going on with other sports and stuff that I was trying to keep up with different things, and mostly just really tracking our boy K in LA.
Yeah.
I really was hoping for that one. No offense, but
Right,
I
team
kind of
one.
would have liked to see that one get through to the final.
They stopped playing him. I know he got hurt, and they never. By the time he recovered, they were in form, and they didn't really want to play him. So I
mean,
understand that, but they
that
stopped.
team's loaded with talent, so
It's insane.
it's hard to
Yeah,
you know.
and
But yeah, I mean,
he's good enough that I'm guessing if he gets a full season, if he actually ever gets a full season with LAFC, they'll probably he's still 22, 20 or 24, 25. I could see some Spanish teams or some German teams or even some Portuguese teams look that level kind of going in, and not your Bayerns or your Dortmunds or anything like that, but you're lower of the Bundesliga and you're lower of all the non-Premier League going for somebody like him because he fits a lot of molds for a lot of teams. But yeah, not
Yeah. There's a lot of guys like that in the league now, and I think that not having especially rooting interest, being a neutral MLS fan again for this season was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Just for the talent that's in the league right now and kind of the possibilities of the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Yeah, you have 4 teams the Habs are all able. I think the Habs would all compete in the Mexican League and have a shot at least being in the top 3 or top 4, maybe not winning outside of LAFC and maybe Seattle, maybe Atlanta. But outside of those 3, who I think could probably compete, outside of those 3, your top 6 teams could be at least competitive in the Mexican League, and that's really a huge step forward.
Yeah.
Toronto should have won Champions League. There was no reason
Yeah.
that Toronto team did. I mean, the Mexican team they sent was not very good. Toronto just completely owned that game. It was just they should have won Champions League. So MLS is in a really good spot. Weirdly enough, I know the promotion relegation people don't like to say it, but it's in a really good spot. They need to stop adding teams. That's my personal opinion. They have too many teams already.
I agree with that completely.
But outside of that, because you're going to see talent, outside of that, it's in a good spot. And a lot of the teams are starting to look. They're buying smarter, but they're also starting to look for younger players. They're starting to look for your Mark Anthony Kays or your Jordan Morrises or half of Dallas's roster. I mean, and then they're starting to let them go to Europe when they're young too. When they see a super talented European or player that can go over to Europe, they're selling for $5-6 million and taking that money and reinvesting it in their academies, which is nice. So
yeah. That last piece is just breaking through the barrier on Champions League, really.
Yeah, and I think LAFC is going to be the first team to do it. Honestly, I love Seattle.
If they stay together.
Well, they're going to stay together for one more year at least. I mean,
it's a short timetable. I'd say it's almost a guarantee if they stay together for the next 2 or 3 years that they get at least 1 or 2 good shots at it. But
yeah. I mean, they're not concerned with Champions League. I mean, they want to win it, obviously, but they're more concerned right now with the MLS Cup. And I mean, they should have won it this last year, but Bob Bradley got outcoached, and that's really what happened.
Surprise, surprise.
He was the best coach in the MLS throughout the year, not even close. It wasn't just that he had the talent; he managed it well. He made sure that, but then he ran into some pressure, and his team wasn't playing well, and he couldn't really adjust to make it work.
Yeah, a lot of. I don't think the coaching in MLS is really up to a very high standard, though.
I agree. Unlike the officiating, which is funny, and I'm actually use that as a transition in a second to the Premier League. But yeah, I mean Brian Schmetzer, who don't get me wrong, Brian Schmetzer was a coach that he went through the struggles of being in the USL. He was in the USL for years. He was the best coach in the USL when Seattle moved up, and then had to sit behind Siggy Schmidt, who is one of the 2 greatest American managers, maybe 3, if you want to throw Bob Bradley in there. American managers of all time. I'm not saying David Wagner can't get there or Jesse Marsch can't get there and very soon, but I mean if you're just looking at the all-time greats, it's Arena, it's Schmidt, and it's Bob Bradley. But yeah, let's get into it. We've been going a little long, so let's get into it. Yeah, as I mentioned, the reffing in MLS is not bad. It's probably, if it was in Europe, it'd be a top 5, maybe just outside the league. I mean, but it's significantly better than England's refereeing, which is maybe the worst in the major leagues of any top division, at least in Europe and the Americas. It's really bad. Yeah. So
that's proven by their ability to somehow just fail at implementing VAR.
Well, it's awful. I mean, today with the penalty was good. The encroachment that Hull did was not by a player that was involved in Watford. I apologize. I started to drink. But Watford did, and was not real. I mean, it was not by a player that was involved in the play, so it was negligible. So they shouldn't have. I mean, City lost anyway, so it didn't really matter in the end. But yeah, it's bad, just terrible. Something that's not terrible this year, ironically enough, has been Manchester United. They've not been amazing, but they've been at least okay.
I just think it's par for the course, really. I mean, I don't remember exactly where I said that they would finish. I think I'm pretty sure I did say some sort of crazy, um, sensationalized prediction of they're just as likely to get relegated as they are to win the title or something like that.
You said they were going to finish around fifth. You said they were
Uh,
better. You said they were better than Chelsea, but not as good as Arsenal.
which I still think, realistically speaking, we should have been. We should be better than Chelsea, but I just think that you kind of add up all of the poor performances against low table teams. That's why we're below them.
Oh,
I don't think that we're a worse team. I just think that we performed worse.
I mean, I texted you
But
saying I think you all have, and I think I added up. You all have more points against the top six than you do against the rest of the league, and I think that's
yeah,
an
we
actual
do.
fact.
That was accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. It might not be
Yep.
anymore because you won your last two matches, or you won one, and you drew your last two matches.
Oh yeah.
But
The only team above us that we haven't beaten is Liverpool, and we drew. We're the only team to draw against them. But the rest of the league, the bottom six, I think we haven't beaten.
that's funny.
It's just, I mean, it is what it boils down to is essentially if a team wants to come and play and actually try, and they attack, we have a chance because we can play counter, we can play, it's a more open game. But any team that comes like Liverpool and City, every team in the league could win the game if they just parked the bus. Which is amazing that we beat Mourinho. But all you have to do is just put everybody behind the ball and make us try and pass around you, and we cannot score. Which is why the small teams beat us.
Like Arsenal, we didn't beat you all, but we drew. Shouldn't have drawn.
It was a very fun game to watch.
Oh my god, that was the worst
Heavy
game.
sarcasm.
I mean, I'd say that's the worst game, but I'm not going to get to Arsenal yet, and I don't really have much to say on it. But that was every match I saw this year. For the most part, every match with Arsenal has been exactly like the United match. And I texted you, I said the Arsenal Manchester United match is the match that we deserve, not the match that we want, but it's the match that we deserve at this point. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, it kind of is. I mean, that was actually sort of a weird outlier, in that it was like it was sort of a consistent medium performance. It's been pretty much 20 minutes of horribleness at the beginning, and then they show up and perform in the later parts of the game, or they're just terrible all the way through, and just don't. They might show a flash or two at the beginning of the game, and then they do absolutely nothing the rest of the game. It's such a weird thing. It's I don't know if it's mental, but there's definitely some tactical things that just aren't really working, and they continue to just do the same thing in every game. And it's maddening. It was absolutely maddening. For some reason, it was different against Arsenal. It was slightly different against Spurs. I guess, I don't know if that was tactical or if it was just Jose. But well, there were a handful of players that had points to prove, so I guess I could just kind of roll that as an outlier.
He also,
For the most part.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I also think that he, when he plays old teams, he wants to prove that he's not the manager they made him out to be. So he'll play a lot more attacking, a lot more creative, a lot more flowing football, which is not what he builds. That's just not what he builds. He didn't build it at United. He didn't build it at Chelsea. It's not what he wants to build at Spurs.
Yep.
But
he played Pochettino ball against us, and we beat him, just
Yeah.
like we did every other time we've played Spurs. It was such a stupid decision, and so anti-Mourinho. It was kind of funny, and I thank him for that. I don't know if he just intentionally went out there to throw the game for us or not. I don't think so, but that's sort of how it felt when he just completely went against his nature and gave us the way for us to win. It was really funny to me. They were talking like the head of the game. It was like, Jose Mourinho knows better than anybody. The weaknesses of the team, and he'll know exactly how to beat United. And he did the exact opposite of what he should have done to win that game. But whatever. I'm not complaining about it. It turned out fine for me. But for some reason, this teams have seen for basically a year now with Ole. I forget who it was after the PSG game, and I'm sorry for not remembering. It might have been Wolves, but whoever beat us after the PSG game laid the groundwork of like saying, "Here, this is how you beat this team. Just don't let them counterattack. Don't give them a counter, and you're going to win." And then the whole rest of the season just went on a massive slide, and everybody's like, "Oh well, it's fine, just weird form, but look at the body of work." Well, yeah, but like they'd figured out all these tactics, I guess. I don't know if he's seriously one-dimensional or if he's just trying really hard to just build a style of play and get one style working right and then build on that eventually. I don't know what his vision is, his overall, and I don't even honestly know if he's the long-term, solution or whatever. But for some reason, we played the same way for what is about 9.5 months or so, 9 months, give or take, since the PSG game, and we've gotten the exact results that we sort of expected. At this point, we can expect to get, minus the Newcastle game, which I still don't know how we scored 4 goals in that. But yeah, it's been a really weird season because we're winning all of the games against the teams that we shouldn't beat because they don't play defensive against us. Well, at least winning or drawing, anyway.
Yeah, he a little bit reminds me of like Arsene Wenger, not in his ability to find talent or his ability to produce the talent, but more so in his ability, or he's a player manager rather than a tactics manager. He has a very specific
Absolutely.
style of tactics that he wants to produce, and he's not really great about changing the way he does things. But
Yeah.
he's really good about finding the players that fit his talent, or not really good, but he's really good about putting players where they need to be, and really good about trying to. And he's good, not great, about finding things. I also think he's very good about a lot of things. I don't think he's great at anything. Um, I think, and that's something that, as you can tell, and part of the reason that his setup works really well is because he's very good at it. But he's not great because you all don't really adapt to the people. You also don't have the squad of like what Wenger had back in the day. I mean, there was a reason Wenger didn't win 6 or 5 trophies in a row. He should have won the Premier League like 4 or 5 years in a row. We had the best squad for 4 or 5 years. We won it twice. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, you ask anybody. I mean, Vieira was the best midfielder in the world. No offense to Roy Keane. Roy Keane, or not in the world, but at Arsenal, and maybe in the world at that point, but definitely at Arsenal. No offense to Roy Keane. Roy Keane was a great box to box holding midfielder type guy, but he wasn't Patrick Vieira. And and I don't want to hear from any United fan that he was. He didn't have the passing range. He couldn't dribble as well, and he couldn't shoot. He could tackle better than him. And he was less of a defensive liability, but that's not what Vieira's role was. Not to go into it too much about Wenger, because it's not about Arsene Wenger. But yeah, he reminds me of that. One good thing that we've found out, though, is you all, just like Arsenal's found a really young superstar, budding superstar, is you all got a nice budding young superstar in Mason Greenwood, who I'm shocked on his debut, did not score a hat trick against Arsenal.
Yeah. I was kind of counting on that. I was kind of hoping that we'd have like a little bit of a repeat of Rashford, but he's he's a player that everybody that I talk to is just like, why is he not starting? And the only thing I think of is just that we're trying desperately not to just go too much too soon with him because he's very clearly one of our best players, if not just pure talent, maybe the best one outside of Pogba. He's I don't want to salt the wounds, but he reminds me a lot of Van Persie in his just technical ability, his
It's
vision.
been long enough. I'm over it.
Yeah, fair enough. But his ability to just sort of pick out just the right angle, make subtle, small movements, turning his hips, finding the right angle to get a shot on or to play a good cross. He's the best player that I've seen come through the academy, including Rashford, and it's not even close. And I think that he has a chance to be, unless he gets hurt or just something goes horribly wrong with his development. I think he has a chance to be like top tier status as a United player for a very long time. Um, I'm trying so hard not to like go into like he's gonna be a legend or like people throw out Ronaldo comparisons with Rashford all the time because statistically they're similar. But realistically speaking, I think that you can compare utilization as well in that and see that Rashford's depended on a whole lot more heavily than Ronaldo was in his time as a teenager at United. I think the same probably goes for Greenwood. I don't know that he comes into any other team right now, at least not any team above us, and performs the way that he performs. Um, but I think potentially, given the same opportunities, in better teams, he might even be better because I just think he's that good. He's that talented. It's just about the right opportunity, and maybe they're just trying to hold him back from going too much too soon, or protecting him because he's still pretty young, well, very young, and he's still pretty sort of not slender, I guess, but he's not grown yet. So
Yeah.
there's some time for every one of those players, but he's going to be a really, really good one, and I'm kind of hoping that it's sort of lessens the pain of some of the departures that we might be looking at in the near future.
You don't think that he would get lost in the fold at a Liverpool or at a Manchester City, a Jadon Sancho? Liverpool doesn't have the youth academy that Manchester City does. They're building it up, but it's just not there yet. I
think he would have gotten lost at City because we've seen everyone get lost at City. I mean, Sancho, Phil Foden now is going to be their next Sancho.
I don't think he will.
I don't. I'm not a believer in Pep to the same degree as everybody else is. And I just don't think the system is there. He is a very good player to just plug in and utilize there. But I don't see why he's not used more often. But maybe the future changes with Silva on his way out. Who knows? I do think he plugs right into the Liverpool team in some way. Outside of their front three, the rest of their team, I don't think is very good at all, attacking wise.
You don't like Mustafi?
But no, their front.
Not Mustafi. Sorry. Oh God. Oh my God. Not Mustafi. Oh God. Swiss player.
I'm trying Shaqiri.
Shaqiri. Yeah,
Jordan. I would take Shaqiri at United, but I'm not saying that he's jumping into anybody else's team. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'd take Greenwood over Shaqiri.
I don't know about that, just because Greenwood is a little one-dimensional. Not because he will be all the time one-dimensional, but because he's, 18, I think.
I think he's good enough to. Yeah, he's just. But I think he's good enough to walk into any team in the league and contribute in some way to get minutes. The same. Absolutely. He's not gotten a lot of minutes for us, because they're trying so hard not to play him too much. But realistically, he's played his goals per 90, and I forget the stat. I should have had that
it's
up.
It's 100 and something. Insane. I just looked it up today. It was 112, maybe. It's third in the league, outside of Tammy Abraham and Jamie Vardy. But he's third outside of and those two are playing okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the shame of it is that he'd have a lot more assists if his teammates were competent to finish.
Or if you all would have purchased Jamie Vardy in the summer, that would have been your all's best purchase.
Yeah, I do think that Vardy would have been a good purchase for us for a number of years actually now. But realistically, the need. I mean, honestly, I'd probably go buy Leicester's whole team. And replace most of our starting 11.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about Leicester's whole team. At least a good portion of them were offered to Arsenal at one point in time by either Leicester or the club before they bought them. Offered, not the fee was never agreed upon, but Mahrez was Arsenal came calling for Mahrez, and Leicester was like, yeah, we should sell him to you. Vardy, they had a conversation, and Vardy decided to stay. Ndidi was offered before he went to Leicester. So you can shout it out at Arsenal saying, hey, come and buy me. The second best center back in the Premier League right now. So you can the second best center back in the Premier League right now after Virgil and Dijk, in my opinion. Now, it could be Zuma or it could be Ottavayel, but in my opinion, it's Soyuncu. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. I apologize. He's Turkish, and I'm poor with Southern Asian names. But he gave a shout to Arsenal, and Emery said, no. We have Socrates and Koscielny. And, yeah. So, no, sorry. Leicester makes me very sad because half their team was at one point either also offered to Arsenal or we were told we could sign them if the money was right. And it was always within a short. If we would have offered more money to Vardy, or we could have had Mahrez if we would have offered, I don't know, $2 million more. It was insane. So yeah, Leicester's roster makes me very sad because we could have had most of their players. Conte should have been an Arsenal player. He should have been an Arsenal player. He was offered to Arsenal along with Thomas Lemar for £8 million. I think I'm exaggerating a little bit. I think it was actually 11, but still. It wasn't much for two players that Lamar is still not amazing, but he's playing regularly at Atletico, and then Conte is still one of the best center midfielders in the entire Premier League. So yeah. But enough on Leicester. I'm going to go back to United. I apologize.
No, you're good. I think it's a fair discussion because that's sort of the bar right now. Is that everybody is sort of looking at who can catch up to the second best because there's no chance of leveling with Liverpool. Um, and I think you just take half that team right now and plug it into United, and that's part of the problem. The comparison to Jose's performance, I think at this point it's different now because it's been probably a week since I last saw it, but there's pretty neck and neck as far as performance for points and goals and allowed and all that stuff between the last year under Ole and the year previously leading up to Jose getting sacked under Jose. And everyone wants to be like, oh, Ole's not as good, or like he should be doing better. He's no better than Jose. But look at the team that he has to work with. At this point, most of the starting 11 doesn't actually get into most of the rest of the teams that are in anywhere near contention for top four. And it's kind of actually amazing that he's been able to bring out performances. And maybe it goes to that management thing you were talking about, getting players up for certain games and finding the right mentality. And I will say that he's at least building some level of club culture again that hasn't been present in like 7 years now. So there's at least that. I think it's maybe going in the right direction. At least it's not like trending terribly downward. But I'm not really sure what the future holds. I'm sort of kind of sitting here day by day looking at, we'll see what happens next because we have no idea how they're going to do against Burnley.
I have because there's not. I want to move on to Arsenal in a little bit, but I want to ask you about De Gea. You told me De Gea was going to sign an extension. You were absolutely correct on that. You also predicted that you all would play counter-attacking football, which you're right about that as well. And he's been okay this year. He's been better than last year, but he's still not been up to David De Gea's status. And honestly, Harry Maguire has not looked as good against Leicester. Is that more to do with the style that you're all playing and the fact that or style versus Leicester style and they protected him a little bit more, or is it to do with the fact that he gets left on an island? So those are my two questions. Is I guess one complimenting you on De Gea's extension, which is I guess for the best for United, so you don't have to buy a keeper because you can't buy much better keeper unless you're going to put down £80 million, which their other £80 million could be used better elsewhere. Or
right. I think we're solid on keeper top to bottom. We have like 2 academy players that are pretty good.
Yeah. But Harry Maguire, he's looked fine. Yeah. He's looked good, but like not like one of the
I think Maguire's problem is just the players around him. For the most part, he's actually he's completed the most passes of anybody on the team, which really tells you everything about what the midfield looks like.
Wait, what?
He's completed the most passes of anybody in United.
That's
Maguire.
Insane. With that midfield.
Well, the second is Lindelof, and third is Wan-Bissaka. So.
Oh my God, that's a problem.
The whole team is just not really. The squad is just not there. And when you have Fred and McTominay as the core of the midfield in front of you. And he's playing on. Maguire's been playing on the left for the most part, and the majority of games he hasn't had Brandon Williams. And realistically, Brandon Williams does leave him out hanging out to dry a lot of the time because he's very aggressive. But he's way better defensively than Luke Shaw is. So he's not really had he's basically been defending a whole half of the field on his own for the most part for the whole season, as well as being the only guy that's actually taking the ball forward and making forward passes. It's kind of a joke, really, that that we've been able to perform in the big games with that being what our engine room is made of, is our center backs. And Lindelof isn't really even solidified his position over Tuanzebe. So I don't know. I think that Maguire's long-term contribution to United is going to be somewhere around what he is now. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know if he has any ceiling above where he is, but I think he's contributing exactly what we needed him to contribute. The players around him are not, and it's sort of not making him look like he's Virgil van Dijk. But I think if you swapped the two, you'd see the same performance out of the teams. Honestly,
I disagree.
I don't think Van Dijk does anything to contribute differently to what the disjointed performances of this current United team, and I don't think there's a huge drop-off if you put Maguire in the Liverpool team.
I disagree for two reasons, one of which is Van Dijk's better in the air. There's no question about that. That's not a shot at Harry Maguire. Van Dijk's the best center back in the air in the world, maybe the best center back in the world.
Well,
but also Harry Maguire's a better passer than Van Dijk. Those are the two things I'm going to say. Also, they both can score goals, but Van Dijk is just ridiculous in the air.
Some of it may be down to just how many threats they're encountering, but I'm looking at the stats right now, and one of those two players is in the top 5 in the league for headed clearances, and it's not Van Dijk.
Yeah, but Liverpool is built upon controlling possession. That's a different discussion for United's
totally different. I'm just saying.
Philosophy versus.
He's not been bad. He's not been bad.
Oh, I just don't think he's been quite up to what you would expect. And I'm not saying I'm not saying he's not been bad or been terrible. It's just kind of surprising that your attack has been a little bit better. Your attack was a little bit better than most people thought it was going to be, and your defense is not quite as good as what people thought it was going to be. That's all I was getting at. Sorry.
I think that United, for me, is exactly what I thought it was going to be, and the perspective of what predictions were going to be for the team differently. And this is why I suck at predicting anything for any other team, is that I don't know as much about the rest of the league as I do about United. But I expected exactly what we're getting. We paid a really huge fee just to get the player that we needed. Comparing him to Van Dijk is natural because of the fee, but I still think, even though there's a pretty decent drop off in terms of talent, I still think that he's the second best center back. At the time he was, and maybe he looks a little less now because transition, whatever, team around him sucks. But I don't think that the team necessarily is doing anything different than I expected them to do. Midfield sucks as I thought it would. Without Pogba, it's a joke. The attack is as dangerous as it can be, but it can't be dangerous when there's 9 guys behind the ball. And the defense is pretty much what I thought. Pretty solid. Huge mistake in them every game.
That's funny. Yeah. I do have a theory, and this is going to be a terribly crazy theory, which I don't actually agree with, because I think it's Soyuncu. By the way, it's not Soyuncu, it's Soyuncu. I apologize to Soyuncu. That's his last name. Fantastic defender, maybe the second best center back in the Premier League. But in all reality, Harry Maguire was the second best defender when he was on Leicester, and now he's not. And Soyuncu is now the second best center back, and he's on Leicester.
But Johnny Evans also looks amazing on Leicester.
Is Johnny Evans the second best center back in the league?
I'd take him right now. I wouldn't have sold him.
He's another player that was linked to Arsenal, shouted out, come and get me, when he was at West Brom. And Arsenal didn't do it because we wanted to go for a higher name center back. And that was after we signed Mustafi. This is not a Mustafi shout out. Yeah. I've got actually nice things to say about Mustafi later when we go to Arsenal, which we'll transition in a second. But yeah, that was more of just a shot at Johnny, or we could have a Johnny Evans who was supposed to replace Mustafi or be his backup, and he should have, and another player that Arsenal was linked with that we decided not to. And I was actually anti.
Into Arsenal.
I was not anti, or I was anti Johnny Evans because I thought he was too old, and he's proved me wrong time and time and time again. But I'm going to go back to Greenwood for 1 second because we've kind of covered United extensively. I'm not saying that. But yeah, one thing that I've really been annoyed with is people comparing Mason Greenwood to Gabriel Martinelli. And I get the comparisons a little bit because he trained at United, and Martinelli and Greenwood are two of the most exciting prospects. But who cares who's better than the other one? You have maybe the best young player in Brazil playing at Arsenal, and you have maybe the best young player in Europe, or at least in England, playing at United right now, outside of maybe Phil Foden. And so who cares who's better?
It's Phil Foden, but that's only it's really only exposure right now.
Yeah, but I mean, but who cares between the two? Who's better? Who's better, Mason Greenwood or Martinelli? I just am tired of the comparisons. It's like let's just enjoy the two players and see how they develop. And let's like they're
Yeah,
both.
I mean, what about the fact that just every team in the league is going to have an exceptionally talented player?
Oh yeah, well, I just like United did really well with developing Mason Greenwood, and Arsenal did really well with finding Gabriel Martinelli, and like so.
United should have signed.
You all had a bunch of people you all should have signed. I mean, we should have signed. Oh God, there's a couple of people, but there was one player who was playing very small who didn't do anything very well on, but who's actually playing well now. And we should have kept Jeff Reine-Adélaïde, who's playing well for Olympiacos and was someplace before.
That's true as well, actually.
Yeah. So I mean, things happen. I'm not.
Some hit, some miss.
Yeah,
and they have different development cycles. Look at Memphis Depay. He looks amazing in France, but he couldn't do it here. So.
At least at United, I do think that I do think that if he goes to Leicester, he becomes one of the best players in the Premiership. But I think that's more about Leicester than it does about either anybody else or Liverpool. If Liverpool picks him up to replace, say,
he won't go to Liverpool.
Salah. If he replaces Salah, then Depay becomes one of the best players in Europe. But that's neither here nor there. I was more using it as a transition because Gabriel Martinelli has been one of the big surprises for Arsenal. He's an incredible prospect. Even Unai Emery couldn't hold his brilliance back. He looks like he's going to be a winger. He looks not like Thierry Henry when it comes to he's not Thierry Henry because Thierry Henry was 21 when he came to Arsenal and Martinelli's 18 and Henry was a little bit more physical because he was a little bit bigger built because he was 21 rather than being 18. But he's got that kind of Ronaldo, Henry, not Cristiano Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo, but Ronaldo, Henry, Benzema type, find the back of the net, get in good positions, and find a way to score no matter where you are, kind of about him. And I'm not saying he's going to be as good as those players. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's going to be that kind of player, or going to be that player, but he's got that ability, and you can see it every time he plays. And every time you play, you can see he gets into smart positions. He puts all his all into the game, and he really is very intense and very, very smart about everything. And it's so nice to have that player. We've been looking for that kind of player for a while. We tried it with Alexis Sanchez, who was at times that way. We want Nicolas Pepe to become that player, and I still think he can. This is not an assault on Nicolas Pepe. I think that Unai Emery ruined a lot of players, and this is not going to be a whole thing about Unai Emery. I think Pepe is still suffering under Unai Emery's regime. And still trying to figure out how to work with England and didn't have the proper manager to do it. He wasted Cavani at PSG, and he wasted Angel Di Maria and Cavani at PSG. That's a thing. So it just
that's true.
You have this amazing player, and it's just refreshing to see this young player that we found, and we're starting to get our scouting system back to where it was. Now it's in South America instead of Europe now, but it's still great. I mean, we found Gilberto, who may be the best Brazilian player ever in the history of the Premier League, with respect to Anderson, with respect to Firmino.
Respects to Anderson.
That was a joke. I tweeted you a picture. Someone said Firmino is the best Brazilian to ever play in the Premier League, and I'm like, he's never gone undefeated in a season, which may change. We'll talk about that later. But I showed you the picture of Anderson with all his medals. It was funny as hell. There's other Brazilians that have played. I don't think that he's out and out, or Firmino's out and out the best. I think Gilberto right now is probably still the best Brazilian to ever play in the Premiership. Outside of, I think Tottenham had somebody. I can't remember who it was. But you have, but yeah, I mean, just it's kind of nice to see Arsenal's academy get back to or Arsenal scouts to get back to finding these unknown, lovely players. So yeah, Martinelli's great. I know he trained at United, but no one knew what he was going to become. And when he trained, he was a year younger. And what you learn in top level of Brazilian football is a lot. Actually, he was fourth level of Brazilian football, but senior. He hadn't had a senior cap when he trained with you all. And when he came to us, he had been playing with the senior team for a full year, and Brazil had already decided to call him up. Even before Arsenal's interest, Brazil had already decided to call him up. So yeah, don't blame United for not getting him. It happens.
I'm not totally heartbroken, or you're just going to miss players, but at the same time, it's all very down to motivation sometimes with some players, and. Who knows if he got his first opportunity with whatever team gave him a trial, maybe he doesn't succeed the way he has. I mean, maybe it could have taken teams passing on him for him to find that extra gear that landed him where he is now at Arsenal. You never know. So yeah, I mean, it's so crazy and at that age,
I mean, Abramovich had an Arsenal contract on the table. He just had to agree to go on a trial. I mean, these things happen. Like, it just does. But I mean, so yeah,
right.
Yeah. I kind of want to go into Arsenal. I'm going to mention Emery for like 3 or 4, like maybe not even 3 or 4 minutes. But
you weren't going to talk about it.
I'm not going to talk about much. It's just like I'm just going to use it as lead into Arteta because I mean, like I said, Martinelli has starred even.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Emery was a manager that I was never super excited about. I know. I talked about him when we first signed him. Like, I was like, oh yeah, we're getting a very experienced manager who's won the league and all that kind of stuff. But it was more of a, well, we signed a manager and I need to be excited about him because I'm a fan of the team. And you're a fan of everybody you sign. No matter, I was not a huge Gervinho fan when we signed him. I was Yossi Benayoun, who actually proved me wrong on loan. Was not a huge Yossi Benayoun fan on loan. Sylvestre, I was not a big fan of Sylvestre when we got from you all because Ferguson does what he does best, which is make people look foolish for paying money for bad players. But like, so when we signed Emery, we signed as the manager. I was like, I don't know if he's the right guy. He really didn't do much at PSG. Look at that team. He finished in second place to Monaco, and that Monaco team was really good, but he still finished in second place and all this kind of stuff. And so I wasn't fully convinced on him. One of the names and it was just kind of like, and then you watch him play, and then like the last 5 games, I know I texted you, we didn't talk about this, but I know I talked to you about it, just like I talked to everybody. In the last 5 games, Arsenal was the worst they've ever been all season, and we played really bad teams throughout those 5 games. Outside of the one team we beat, who was Wolves, I think we beat Wolves at Wolves in the last 5 games of the last season, and that was the only one we had, which is weird. And we got destroyed by Chelsea. And I was like, we got to get rid of this guy, but it took a while for us to get rid of him. And like when we should have fired him, we didn't. But like the team didn't have confidence. There was no real formation. Players were played out of position. Xhaka was played as the 6 instead of the 7, which is stupid. He should be playing next to the 6. He should have a guy protecting him. And then Guendouzi was let to play constantly, even though he doesn't ever know where he's on the pitch. He just wants to run around the pitch and look like he's trying to do things. Not a sense Guendouzi, I think, with a disciplined manager, can become a great player. I just don't think he's there yet. I don't think he's where people think he is. But that's not the point.
Flashes. He has flashes.
He does.
A lot.
He's a talent. I don't want Arsenal to let him go. He's 20 years old. He's got all the talent to be the next great France midfielder. He's got all the talent to be a Makelele or a Vieira or somebody, or he can go and become an attacking midfielder. It doesn't really matter. But the problem with it is he's not there yet, and he's undisciplined, and he needs a guy who's going to basically say, here's a square, you're going to stay inside the square. If you leave the square, I'm taking you out of the match. But he needs that right now. But that's not where I'm getting at. But Guendouzi didn't have any discipline. There are certain players that you knew he was going to play every match, and Guendouzi's one of those. And so there was not a whole lot of discipline. There was not a whole lot of confidence in the team. And like players that were not Aubameyang, Guendouzi, all these players that kind of given a free leash were not happy with him. Xhaka's one of them, and I'm gonna go into Xhaka later because I actually have a whole thing about Xhaka. But we're not one of them. So it came to a point where it was like we need to have him fired, and this was like in October, and it took till after the international break in November to let him go. And it should have been during the international break because we would have had 2 weeks to find a new manager. And when we were looking at old managers, Arteta was one of the names where I was like, you know what? That'd be fine. I'd be happy with Arteta. I mean, we're not going to get. Dominic Tedesco was off the table at this point, and he's failed in Germany. He's not failed. He's been fine in Germany, but he hasn't been what we thought he was going to be. And I think some of the other options I thought haven't done what they thought they were going to do. But people brought up Nagelsmann, which would have been the hire. Like we could have got Nagelsmann cheap at that point because he wasn't what he is now. And Leipzig would have been like, okay, you're going to pay $5 million for our manager. That's fantastic. Take him. But we didn't do that. Nagelsmann would have been the hire at that point. At this point, we can't afford him. Very few teams can afford Nagelsmann. It's going to take you $15, $20 million as a transfer fee to get Nagelsmann out of his contract.
Maybe.
I guarantee you that's what his contract is. Like, he's just one of the he's in my opinion as good a manager as anybody in Europe. But if we can't have him, I would like our getting into Mikel Arteta. Arteta studied under Pep. He studied under Wenger. He apprenticed under Mauricio Pochettino, and all of them came away saying he's one of the smartest people they've ever managed with. And this is like not even like just not even bringing up people like, oh yeah, he might manage Arsenal. They're just like, okay, yeah. They're like, what do you think about Mikel Arteta as a manager? I'm like, this is our opinion of him. And like the way that City responded to not happy behind the scenes about Arsenal coming in for Arteta shows you exactly what I like. He is very intense, very disciplined, very, very much about everybody has a position that they're going to play, and he wants those positions to be maintained until you get a feel for them. I know Arsenal was not as attacking as you would think they would be against Bournemouth, but I think that we need to maintain some discipline and some stability in the team, and until that can happen, you can't have a free-flowing Arsenal team. You can't have Ozil at his finest. You can't have Aubameyang just going all over the back line finding space. You can't do the things that make these players the best because you want to make sure you're not shipping in terrible goals left and right like you were under Emery and even under Wenger. So, like, I don't know. Just everything said and the reputation of Arteta, I feel like that he's maybe not the guy in the future, but he's a much better option than we have. And Arsenal played the best they've played since the first couple weeks of Emery. And I honestly think that a lot of players were tired of Wenger and just decided to be a little more disciplined under Emery, and then they realized they didn't have to be and could be lazy. That's not gonna happen under Arteta. That's just not going to happen. At least from what I can tell from training. He yells at people, you're going to be here. We're going to do these kind of things. We're going to kind of put these drills. We're going to beat this out of you. When I previewed the season, I was talking about how I was not super worried about our center backs because even though they weren't great, I thought they were serviceable. I couldn't imagine how much worse they could have gotten. And I feel like that's not to harp on Emery, I feel like that's a thing with Emery that I feel like Arteta is trying to beat out of them. Not physically, but, with training and video sessions and that kind of thing. I feel like that we are at a point where he's getting better. And you can tell in the way the players carried themselves, even in young Everton match. They're carrying themselves much more confidently, and they're carrying themselves with a lot more aggression, and they're working a lot harder, and they're a lot more disciplined. And it's nice to see. And then eventually we'll be able to have a lot much more free-flowing attack, but it's going to take time. The goal, it was kind of like an old-school Arsenal match. We against a team that's in the bottom half of the league. Those Bournemouth is actually, I think, above us. They're around us. Let me look at the table right now. I have it up. Where are you? Table.
Bournemouth?
Yeah.
I had that up.
Is Bournemouth above Arsenal?
They're 16th now.
Okay. Yeah, but that's an old-school Arsenal thing. Where we play a team that's worse than us and we draw 1-1 even though we have the vast
there's only 4 points in it, but still.
Yeah, we have the vast majority of chances. We have the vast majority of possession, and they have one real chance. Bournemouth had a couple chances, but their best chance is the match they score.
Yeah.
That was an old school Arsenal match. It was nice to see. And so he kind of put us back into where we were under Wenger. And maybe he can, and hopefully, because that's his first match, and he had 3 days to get us in that situation. It's not going to happen this week, and we're going to lose probably to Chelsea. We're probably going to draw or lose to you all, depending on how we play.
I wouldn't guarantee a loss against Chelsea.
Yeah, I got statements on Chelsea. But
they're not. I mean, they've lost 3 of their last 4.
Yeah, no, I'll explain why I have my statements. But no, it's they. But Arsenal, we're not out of the running for a top 4 slot. We're 8 points behind, which is a lot, but not over. Especially if we can buy a defender in January. I'm not saying we're going to. I'm not going into January rumors. I've heard the rumors. I genuinely am gonna let it happen when it happens. There's one rumor that's gonna happen that makes me very upset. But we'll talk about that in a second. But
I think it's worth talking about wish lists, but I don't think it.
I don't want to talk about a wish list. This is not a wish list. I mean, I can mention who Arsenal's been linked with, but it doesn't really matter. One of which is a player we talked about earlier.
No names, just needs.
Yeah. But yeah, we need a center back. I mean, all of our fullbacks are hurt right now. Like all of our fullbacks are hurt. We have 3 fullbacks on the team right now, and they're all hurt.
Do you want Luke Shaw?
I'm sorry.
You want Luke Shaw?
I'll take Luke Shaw.
Really?
Yeah, he's better
Sign
than...
the check right now.
He's left back, right? He's a left back?
Yes.
Yeah, he's better than
It's hilarious you asked that.
Saka, and that's not a shout out at Saka. Saka's been fine, but he's also 18, and he's traditionally a winger that can also play as a retracted 9. Like that's the position he's been trained in for the senior team, and we're having him play as our left wing back.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's very funny. Actually.
Yeah, Bellerin's hurt, which is not surprising. Tierney's hurt, which is not surprising. But the injury with Tierney apparently is one of the big long-term injuries. So hopefully I'm not saying we're going to. Knowing Arsenal, he's going to get 16,000 more injuries throughout his time at Arsenal. But and then he's going to leave, and he's going to be super healthy the rest of his career. Like Bakary Sagna. Oh my God, I have a whole thing about Bakary Sagna that we'll discuss outside because there was somebody comparing Arnold Alexander to Marcelo and Diego Alves, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Danny Alves?
I'm sorry?
Danny Alves?
Oh, Danny Alves, I'm sorry. But yeah. The two guys who basically created the modern fullback.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not above praising Liverpool for the talents that they have.
Oh, he's great.
And Alexander Arnold is one of the best fullbacks.
He's the best fullback in the
one of the best fullback in the world. Yeah, it's fair. It's very fair. But I don't think that. I also think that there's just like Danny Alves and Marcelo are in their 30s doing this still. Well, there's not a huge drop off. If anything, I don't know that I would. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it just you have like if you're building a top 11 of all time, most likely
you're not including Alexander Arnold.
No, but you're gonna probably include Marcelo and Danny Alves, like the two best fullbacks maybe of all time. And like no offense to like Gary Neville and Ashley Cole.
Maybe. Yeah, there's argument for Maldini. There's an argument for Roberto Carlos.
But there's no argument, but no offense to
there's
Neville.
Definitely no argument for any current fullback.
No, or anybody in England's history. And that's it's just comparing to Ashley Cole is over the line. Comparing to Bakary Sagna is a really good thing to do because Bakary Sagna was the most underrated fullback and one of the most underrated players in the Premiership for years. And comparing a guy who's been great for 2 years to one of the most underrated players maybe in the history of the Premier League is a good comparison. Comparing them to two of the best fullbacks of all time is just insane. So yeah,
it's almost as insane as comparing a young forward to Robin van Persie.
Yeah, not really. You can compare him when he started because Van Persie definitely showed signs.
Play style, I kind of understand the play style comparison.
Yeah.
I think that Alexander Arnold as a player reminds a lot of certain attacking fullbacks, but you can't compare his level.
And he might.
You just can't.
And he might get there. There's no saying that he might revolutionize the fullback position and maybe be one of the greatest fullbacks of all time.
He's still too young to predict how the next 12 years of his career are going to go.
You're talking about the history of fullback. Marcelo and Danny Alves are two of the. I mean, like Danny Alves was like in his late 20s and the best fullback in the World Cup, and like because Danny Alves is in his late 30s, he's not really playing much anymore. And then Marcelo was like he was the best fullback at his position up until 2 or 3 years ago. He was better than Philip Lahm. Like I know Philip Lahm played both.
I'd agree. I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was in his early 30s. There's no reason a fullback in his early 30s should be the best at his position. But Marcelo was just that good. I remember he played the U.S. one time, and he was the most annoying player on the pitch because he was dirty, he was cheap, he would dive at any moment, and he'd do ugly fouls. And it was a friendly, by the way. This was a friendly. And I remember watching him.
Maddening to play against. Maddening.
And then he would just destroy us offensively and defensively. Our wingers couldn't do anything against him, and he would just dribble past us and put a perfect cross. Like Roberto Carlos, I mean, we're not gonna have much more. But Roberto Carlos was great, but offensively, but he still had some defensive lapse. Maldini was not always the best offensively, but he was never asked to be that guy. So yeah, but yeah, back to Arsenal.
Marcelo is probably in my non-United 11.
Who?
Marcelo is probably in my non-United.
You're not gonna put Danny Alves in there as well?
No, I'm saying he's one of the first names I throw down.
Oh, my
as far as my favorite players I've watched.
Danny Alves is
outside
definitely my fullback of the non-Arsenal 11, and maybe even of the Arsenal, even if you're including Arsenal players in there, because there's not a fullback that compares to Danny Alves. He was just fun to watch. Just he would link up with Xavi, he'd link up with Iniesta, because that midfield would just kind of rotate, and he would link up with Messi. He had a connection with Eto'o before Pep took over. He just was fun to watch, and I don't think I'll ever be a fullback I think as entertaining as Danny Alves. So yeah, that dude was fantastic. But yeah, I'm gonna go back to Arsenal because apparently that's where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's just it's been boring. There's nothing that's been outstanding outside of Bernd Leno. Bernd Leno has the highest save percentage in the Premier League right now.
Yeah, he's very good.
Yeah, he's very good, and he has made one of the fewest number of errors just because he's really a fantastic keeper. But outside of Bernd Leno, Torreira's not played enough to really establish himself. Xhaka has been in and out of the lineup and when played next to Guendouzi, who is a problem, next to Xhaka specifically, but just to anybody. Guendouzi's doesn't have discipline. Joe Willock, they keep switching him from being an attacking midfielder to a holding midfielder to a box-to-box midfielder. They don't have a position for Joe Willock. And I think it's more because he's young and less established and doesn't know his role yet.
I don't get it.
Well, I think that it's down to Emery. Emery didn't know where to train him, and I think he'd be willing to develop into that kind of player, but he needs the coaching to develop. Saka has been inconsistent. Aubameyang, even though he's second in the goal or in the boot or in the most goals scored this year, he's been kind of inconsistent this year. Lacazette has been bad this year. It's just Arsenal's got nothing remarkable about them. They're an entirely unremarkable team. We're 11th in the table right now.
Yeah.
There's just nothing remarkable about them. If you were listing your best 11 from the team or for the Premier League, there was always somebody at least in discussion. And outside of Aubameyang, just because he scored 13 goals, there's nobody even in the remote discussion. Ozil's was terrible.
That's the thing. Yeah, Aubameyang belongs in the discussion for what he contributes, but there's so many other players in that area of the field.
Yeah, I mean, So yeah, it's just Arsenal. There's not a whole lot of discussion on Emery, and then Arteta. I'm hoping he brings positive energy, and it looks like he is. And he's looking like they're defensive because they played so much better against Bournemouth. They controlled things. They were the ones in control. It looked like Wenger ball at times. It looked like Pep ball at times. It looked, and I'm not saying he's a combination of Arsene Wenger and Pep Guardiola. Don't get me wrong. I'm not there yet. I do think that there was positive signs, and I do think he's young, and I do think he's incredibly intelligent, just judging by the way he played over years, and was the best holding midfielder in England for a year, even though he wasn't shown as that. The year that we finished third and beat Manchester City, the year that they beat you all, the year they won their first title, because we scored a goal against them, and they thought it was the end of the run, even though they ended up winning the title that year. But yeah, he was. He's just very smart, and he was always bossy on the field, and he's bossy now, and he's been under the right people and learned from the right people. His last 2 years at Arsenal, he was mostly a bench player, so he mostly sat next to Wenger and was basically a pseudo assistant. He spent 3 years under.
He was that, yeah. He's been that for a while.
He's been spent 3 years under Pep Guardiola. I mean, so he's very smart and very quick to adapt to these things. And you talk to people who know him that aren't Pep, not Arsene, not Pochettino, that say the same thing, that he just knows what he's doing. So it's nice to see a positive figure that isn't this guy that's kind of destroyed every club he's been at. Sevilla was never top 4 in Spain, even though they won 2 Europa Leagues in a row. PSG didn't win a title one of the 2 years, and they never did anything in Champions League. It's just nice to see that we got rid of somebody that was kind of a negative force and have maybe more of a positive force. The thing is, though, it's going to take years. If Arsenal doesn't win the Europa League and doesn't finish in Champions League spot, that's not a big deal. We have William Saliba coming in. We have money to spend. We have a lot of money to spend, actually, especially if we sell Aubameyang, which I kind of hope we do. I'll get into. He's kind of a cancerous force at this point. He has he's more concerned with his accolades.
Your new Sanchez.
Yeah, kind of. He's more concerned with what's best for him and less concerned with what's best for the team. So he wants his friends to do well. He wants himself to do well, but he doesn't care.
I think there's room for that in a functioning team. There's not room for that in a dysfunctioning team.
Yeah, and
that's currently what the scenario is.
Yeah, Lacazette is getting older, and the style that we play doesn't really fit him. I'm not saying it won't eventually under Arteta, but He doesn't have this. He gets winded a lot easier, and when we're playing on ice, a strong build-up where he doesn't really have to move a whole lot outside of the past the center line, he'd be great. Great back to goal center back that does more with his feet than does scoring goals. He'd be fine with that, but that's not who he was. So it just be interesting to see what we do with him, because we could probably get $40 million for him from some Italian team or some Spanish team that's looking to get in Champions League.
I think you could sell him in the league.
Yeah,
and get that. But
yeah,
I don't know that you want to do that.
Yeah, but it's just going to be interesting to see, because it's not a short project. You don't hire someone like Mikel Arteta for. Emery is a Champions League manager. He's a guy you hire, and you want to get in Champions League.
Is he?
Within a year and a half. I'm not saying like that. I'm not saying like he is that manager. I'm just saying like his profile fits that description. So
I don't know.
Oh no! I'm just that's kind of where I was at. He was a highly experienced manager. Won the league in France. Won Europa and Spain. Constantly in Champions League. He's the type of manager you hire if you want to get back in the Champions League within a season or two. He decided he wasn't that guy. I'm not saying him specifically is that guy. He wasn't that guy. I'm not Emery at all. I haven't been pro Emery since May of last year. Actually, it was probably April, but I'm gonna give him. But you don't hire someone like Mikel Arteta for Champions League this year, or maybe even Champions League next year. You do what Liverpool did, which was, and I'm not saying Arsenal can be as successful as Liverpool this year. I don't think anybody really will ever be as successful as Liverpool this year.
Yeah.
But you hire him for the long haul. You don't mind if you don't make Champions League for a season or two. What you mind is you want him to be building a team that will get you in Champions League. And I know like Arsenal ownership is like, well, he's got to be. There's rumor that he's got to be in Champions League in a year and a half. But nobody. And no logical fan is saying he needs to be in Champions League this year or even next year. What we are saying is we need to build young, and we need to have exciting players, like Liverpool did. Like, they didn't just buy. Like, Mo Salah was one of the last buys, and Sané was one of the last buys. Virgil van Dijk was their last major buy. They were doing it with players that weren't like that building up to Champions League. Firmino was a very smart buy. It's players like that. People are like, we're linked to Kevin Volland, and I'm not saying Kevin Volland is coming to Arsenal. I'm not discussing the Volland rumor. But Kevin Volland is that kind of player like Firmino, which he doesn't score a ton of goals, but he is that guy that kind of annoys the defender and gets into good, smart positions and really does things that really make life easier on everybody else, like Firmino does. And again, I'm not saying like Kevin Volland is the answer for what Arsenal needs, but what I am saying is that's the kind of player that Liverpool targeted that Arsenal fans are kind of like poo-pooing. And it's just like Liverpool is very smart with who they targeted. They're buying a player from from Salzburg that's not Hassel. They bought
a center back from Southampton.
Yeah,
that
but Van Dijk was rated as one of the top players that
he wasn't.
Champions League. He was rated as a $60 million center back at that point in time.
That was laughed at. The transfer fee was absolutely laughed at.
Oh, a little bit, but it was because it was $80 million.
You and I had talked about it. We were fans of him, but I don't think that the average fan, and definitely not the media, were on the Virgil van Dijk.
So it's just kind of we're in the situation where
they
Liverpool was before when they hired Klopp, and I think Arteta may not be the manager to get us there, but I think if you're going to hire a manager like that, and you can't afford, say, a Nagelsmann. Julian Nagelsmann would solve a lot of Arsenal's problems when it comes to management along that manner. And he's young and he's talented. He reminds me a lot of Klopp. But he's an over £10 million manager that you have to pay just to get him in the door before what you pay him per year and before transfer fees and that kind of stuff. And that's not something Arsenal can afford at this point. When Klopp came to Liverpool, he was free. So if you're not going to be able to afford that, you're gonna have to deal with someone like Arteta. And I love Arteta. Arteta's like just loved him as a player. I almost got his kit. I thought about getting the new kit with his name on the back. I don't want to do that because I don't want to damn him. But and I wouldn't do that.
I've been telling Jason he can't get an LA kit.
But I can't. I don't want to like because if he wasn't a former player, I wouldn't even think about getting his name on the back of my kit. I never thought about an Emery kit. I thought about a winger kit, but that's a different story. Most United fans thought about a Ferguson kit. It's just like you have that manager. You think about that.
I think it's different when it's a former player. I get it.
Yeah.
Totally get
but
it.
but yeah, you so you're not hiring Arteta for this year or even next year. You're really hiring him for like 5 years down the line. And as long as the team keeps showing improvement, and not even like you want improvement in the stats, but what you really want is improvement. You want improvement in the way they play, in the way they show, and the effort and that kind of stuff. Then it's great because you're going to lose players that may make you worse in the short term, but in the long term.
Yep.
If the players that were worse are playing better, then that's great. Because Arsenal didn't lose anybody, and that's the thing under Emery. We didn't lose anybody, and we were still playing worse. Whereas, like, I was going to say something about Max Mustafi. Mustafi has been one of our most consistent defenders, but I think that's also because he's got the least coaching from Emery. When he's come in, he's been solid for the most part. He's been a fine defender. He's not been in his head. He's not been quite as like I got to do these crazy things. Now he had a moment at Bournemouth, but outside of the one moment at Bournemouth, he was fine. Mustafi's a good. He's been playing well. I kind of harped on him hard on the offseason, but I think I'm going to blame that more on Emery than more on Mustafi. I think he's fine. Now we lost a couple really usable players, but like Nacho and like Koscielny, but Mustafi's been better than Socrates and Luiz most this season, and that's not hyperbole. So I don't know. It's just like so. It's just you can tell there's a different feel, and I think Arteta is a positive. So he may not be the long-term answer, but he's a much better answer than Emery. I'm going to let you talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of parallels between the scenario at United and the scenario at Arsenal. There's a lot of very usable players that, yeah, I mean, realistically, every player on the team is flawed in some way, but that's sort of where you are right now. I mean, we're both in the exact same spot, and I think Arteta has the job that Ole has just a year afterwards. He has some dead wood he probably needs to get rid of. He has some really, really good young talent that he needs to find spots for to bring into the team. And it's a long-term project. It's probably not going to have a steep upward curve in any of the the near future. But establishing, this is what I like the fact that so many teams are bringing in former players is awesome. But I just like the fact that they're bringing in a guy who has a general mentality and approach to the game that fits what Arsenal means, I guess, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I will argue that there is one player that doesn't really have a significant weakness. It's just he was misplayed, and he's still getting used to Premiership. Also, the refs have been just letting people almost break his legs. Like literally, that's not hyperbole. But Nicola Pepe, if you look at the last 5 matches, he's got 3 leg breaking tackles on him that should have resulted in red cards. Like not hyperbole. If you look at the tackle, you're like, that's a red card, and 2 of them went without any card. They're not protecting this guy. But Pepe is a player. He's still got to adapt. But I don't know, if he's got proper organization and proper formation, I feel like he's still a player that's shown signs of greatness. He's the best free kick at Arsenal, and that kind of stuff. I will say that one thing that's going to make it more difficult is losing Granit Xhaka, who we're apparently losing in January.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you can make parallels to a lot of teams across the league. Supposedly, Tottenham's going to be losing Eriksen. Either way, he's going to be gone in the summer. Obviously, there's questions over Pogba. There's questions over Phil Foden and half of the City team. Liverpool needs replacements in midfield. I don't know whether they're getting rid of anybody, but there's really not anybody who's super established in midfield in the league right now at the big clubs. There's so much question marks. So I don't think that Arsenal necessarily not in a terrible position.
I will argue,
but
though,
I do think.
Sorry.
I think that's the big need, though. I do think that's the big need because you look at the stats, and stats aren't everything, but look at the stats and chances created for basically all of those teams. There's no midfielders involved in it. The big teams, the teams that are actually in the top portion of the table, have at least 1 or 2 midfielders who are getting the ball moving forward. And I don't think that Xhaka's really done the work that you. Well, maybe it's within his limits as a player, but I don't think that. I think it's a huge move of getting the right replacement in. I don't think that it's a huge loss if the right replacement comes in. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's
I
exactly what I would think. I do think that he is really good. I said this in the preseason. He's really good about being the basically Arsenal's metric. Um,
yeah,
he really maintains pace. He really is good about getting the pass out of the backfield or the back line, and he doesn't lose the ball. People are like, "Oh, he loses the ball." He loses the ball 99% of the time. I think he's had one or two errors in his own half that led to goal scoring opportunities. Now he lost the ball in opponents' halves, but yeah, it's not quite as bad. But he's really good about finding the right person at the right time in his own half and figuring out when he does. He's not fast, as I've said before. He's not a great dribbler, but like there's nobody on the team that is as disciplined positionally as he is. And that's not hyperbole. There's Guendouzi's not, Willock's not, Torreira's not. And like for Torreira, that makes sense. Torreira is the Patrick Vieira, the Roy Keane type mold of outsong. Can't really think of anybody else at this point of a guy who's really, really very much attack the ball, attack the ball, attack the ball.
I
But
think he's more. I think he's more like an Arturo Vidal type player.
yeah. No.
Um,
That's still the same thing. But he's not positionally the best. But the thing with Lucas Torreira is if he's got that midfielder behind him that can cover when he misses a tackle, or that he knows that he knows that he can go out of position when he runs up forward and that kind of stuff, he's not going to be in a position. Fabregas was that same way. He's not as good as
mhm.
Fabregas. He's not as good as Vieira. He's not as good as Roy
No.
Keane. He's not as good as Arturo Vidal. He might become as good as those guys. I'm not saying he won't. I'm not saying he will. He's 24. He's still got plenty of time to develop. But what I am saying is Xhaka is a player that allows him to grow and to go into the game. And Torreira is, unlike Guendouzi, and even Willock at times, Torreira is good enough defensively that he makes it much harder for people to dribble directly through the midfield. So when people
hmm
come through the midfield, they have to go basically around Torreira, which allows Xhaka to get into the proper position to avoid the pass and to be able to foul when foul is necessary and to really get into the proper position. So those two are great together. But the thing is, though, when you take Xhaka out of that equation, you have two midfielders that are very much I have to go forward. I have to go to the ball. I have to not stay in front of things. They're not very disciplined. And like when you have one non-disciplined midfielder, that's fine. But Arsenal doesn't have anybody. We have one guy. His name's Sam Burton. He is way too young. He doesn't have the game knowledge, and he's way too skinny at this point to really play in the Premier League. So if Xhaka leaves, that's fine. But yes, you're right. We need a replacement. And there's a lot of rumors. The one guy I'm going to bring up is Thomas Partey from Atletico. He's very disciplined. He did play a more traditional number six or guy protecting the back line. He did play more of that at Atletico than Xhaka plays, but he's a much more disciplined, much more. I have a very specific role and I have to cover it. So I feel like he's that kind of guy. There's other players that are specific. I'm not saying like we should. I'm not going into rumors, but like there are certain. But you have to find that guy who's going to be disciplined, who's going to know his role, who's going to allow the person next to him to explore and do their thing. Because we don't have
Yeah.
anybody else with Xhaka. And like our fans are like, Xhaka's going to leave. Xhaka's going to leave. He had 2 or 3 bad tackles last year. Well, if you look at Guendouzi had lots of times where he would just jog back and leave his man go into bad positions. You look at Joe Willock. Joe
Yeah.
Willock gets way too far forward because he's more of a tradition. I think he's more of a 10 or even like more of an Aaron Ramsey type than he is a Xhaka
Yeah.
type. We don't
I
have
agree.
that guy in the squad. And like there are very few people I think are irreplaceable in Arsenal. I really don't think that we're good enough at any position outside of maybe Aubameyang and Xhaka
Right.
and even Leno to an extent, though I think Emi Martinez may be able to take that position. Liverpool Confederation Cup, not Confederation Cup, Liverpool Carling Cup, or whatever you call it now, notwithstanding, Carabao Cup, notwithstanding. I think that Xhaka is the most irreplaceable player on our team when it comes to who we have in-house. So if we're going to get rid of him, which is apparently the rumor, we have to have a replacement for him. I'm not saying there are not better replacements out there, and I'm not saying he's not easy to replace when you come to there's not a plethora. Charles Arangis from Bayer Leverkusen is a perfect example. Or no, Arangis is a perfect example. He would have to pull Torreira in, but perfect example, and I love Leverkusen, as you know. But there's other people from other teams that would be perfect players you could bring in and replace Xhaka. But Xhaka does not have an in-house natural replacement. And so it's kind of like, so if he, and I feel like Arteta, and if we do bring in Xavi, who's one of our rumored coaches that we're going to bring in, I feel like if he would stay, he'd become one of the better one of the better holding midfielders in Europe. But he's already wanted to leave, which I don't blame him with the way he's been treated by the fans, the way he was treated by Emery, the way he was even treated by ownership. I get why he would want to leave. I understand that 100%. I don't blame him for wanting to leave. It's just people celebrating him wanting to leave is an absolute travesty. He's one of our best players when it comes to, or most important players when it comes to the team. When we play with him, we win more often than we lose, and we actually win more often than we draw with him in the squad, as long as we have Torreira in there. So when we have those two in the midfield, we're at our best, and there's just isn't a whole lot of replacement for him specifically. And there's not a whole lot of replacement for Torreira, but Torreira is not rumored to, or not basically being confirmed he's leaving in January. So Arsenal needs to do that and replace him. That's my big rant on Xhaka. I like Xhaka. I think he's a great player. I might get a Xhaka kit from this year just because he's gone. Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna get mad at me for buying a Granit Xhaka kit? Cool. Like, yeah. What are you gonna do? He's our most important player.
I have a Schweinsteiger kit.
You do have a Schweinsteiger kit. But Xhaka's been here for 3 years. He's got over 100 caps. He's been one of our most important players for years, and he's been criminally underrated by people like AFTV. And I hate that, like people that I respect and people whose opinions I listen to have this opinion of Xhaka where I'm like, do you look at stats? Do you watch the game? Do you understand? Like,
they just want him to do something he's not capable of doing. And I think
that's
Partey's the perfect example you said.
Yeah.
It's a guy that does what Xhaka does plus a little bit of extra going forward. And that's really that's what they want.
But people don't want him
he's
to.
He's not capable of doing that.
But people don't want him to play. Is the thing? Like, we're like, we don't want Xhaka on the team, and I'm like, well, and it's like he's still one of the top 5 best holding midfielders in the Premier League, statistics-wise. He's actually not as bad defensively as people want to make him out to be. And passing-wise, he's amongst the best. And he doesn't pass sideways. I mean, he does a little bit, but he's not a sideways passer. He's fine. He's good. He's good enough to get you into Champions League as long as you have a stable base midfield. And
nobody would be saying anything about him if he had better players around him.
I'm sorry?
Nobody'd be saying anything about him if he had better players around him.
Absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. And, like, I know when he was brought in, he was supposed to be this, like, bruiser type guy, and he's kind of become Gilberto Silva. Not quality of Gilberto Silva or Emmanuel Petit or any of those type players, but Mikel Arteta. But he's got that ability. But he's got that ability, and we're never going to see it at Arsenal because he's leaving. And there's nothing wrong with him wanting to leave. Again, I'm not blaming him on this. This is not a Brian shouts at Xhaka for wanting to leave. This is me shouting at everyone saying, you're terrible, sending him death threats when he announces the birth of his daughter. When Kolasinac and Ozil get or when he puts support for Kolasinac and Ozil, people were saying, I wish it was you in the car. Like, those are things that people said. These are not hyperbole. So, like, I get why he wants to.
Yeah, every team has that, though.
It just doesn't seem like there was always one player they should do that. And again, we've talked about this before. It's just like,
well, at least they aren't racist.
One of our biggest supporters for AFTV called him Albanian.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, he's Swiss, by the way. He's Swiss. Switzerland
He's
finished
Swiss Albanian though. Isn't
he? Switzerland was on one of the top 8 teams of the World Cup, and he was their starting midfielder. And he was their best midfielder, by the way. He was their best player on that team. Like,
I believe Xhaka and Shaqiri both came. Their families both came from Albania.
They did. So but it's still racist to call someone who's Swiss Albanian.
No, I mean,
it is. Like, no. I get saying that
in a negative context. It's mentioned in a negative context a lot of times.
Yeah, well, this is someone complaining about Xhaka. This was somebody saying Xhaka's Albanian, rather than saying, like, I get why he did
using it as a thing to say that's negative about him is insanely racist.
It's not about the eagle celebration that he did when he scored a hell of a goal in the World Cup. One of the best goals of the World Cup. He scored one of the best goals of the World Cup, and he did the eagle celebration against Bosnia. Funny enough, which is just.
Well, I mean, the reaction was intentional. I mean, it's what he.
Yeah, but you don't blame him.
So, anyway.
You don't blame
No.
him for that. No. We're not going to get into world politics that much, but you don't blame him for doing that. And Steven Lichtsteiner, who was Arsenal player last year, not this year, he also did the eagle because he was so close to Shaqiri. He was so close to Xhaka. Mm-hmm. He was so close to, I can't remember the other player. There was another player on the Swiss team that was of Albanian descent, and he did the eagle to support them. Support them and their Kosovian Albanian players. I can't remember who it was. And and he did it he kicked a guy out of bounds and did the eagle into his face. Or he did it after a goal and then kicked a guy out of bounds and told him to screw off, being polite, and called him racist. It was just perfect. So I'm not. Xhaka has the ability to be a top 20 or top 10 midfielder in Europe. And Arsenal hasn't unlocked that because they haven't ever put him in a proper position with proper players. They finally have with Torreira, but they don't do that consistently. And it's just unfortunate that he's leaving, and we need a replacement. And there are replacements out there, but it's gonna take some money, and probably more than we're gonna get for Xhaka because the way the fans have treated him, and the way the ownership has treated him, and the way Emery treated him. And Arteta has basically stated he wants him to stay, but he understands why he wants him to leave. So yeah, but. Yeah. That's kind of the last thing I have outside of the future of Arsenal. Arsenal's not going to probably finish top 4, as I've stated. We got a shot at Europa. Inter Milan is probably our biggest. Inter Milan or Ajax are our two biggest hurdles. No offense to Manchester United. I just don't think I think you're going to face one of those two before, and I don't think you're going to beat them. Especially if you face Ajax. Ajax will probably beat you. I'll have to go face Ajax.
In the Europa League?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that United care about the Europa League. To be honest.
I do think if you lose your next 3 matches, if you went from being have a hope for Champions League to not being in Champions League, you'll start caring about Europa League much quicker.
I legitimately don't think that they're gonna put much stock in the Europa League entirely because I don't think that there's the squad to compete in all of the fronts, and I think they're just gonna start picking things to drop out of. To be totally honest with you, I don't know that that's how I would approach it. I just think I have a feeling that that's how the team's going to approach it.
Yeah, I feel like Arsenal's going to do the opposite. I feel like we do have a squad to if we were playing Lacazette as the backup and playing Aubameyang as a starter and playing Pepe and Martinelli and then replace them with Reece Nelson and Saka. If we had the ability to do that, I think that we would approach them in a very positive manner. But I do think that Arsenal's got a good shot at winning Europa League this year, but that's the only way we make Champions League. That is the only way. And I'm going to use that as a transition to our end period because we have this is going. It's been a very long conversation, Andy. It's been a good conversation.
It's actually not as long as our last podcast.
Yeah, but that one ran really long. And we're not going to get into a long conversation about City's transfer policies or Liverpool's, to be honest, or Leicester's. So we're just gonna have a end of the year predictions, I guess, and talk about where we were. Neither of us saw Liverpool. We kind of mixed up Manchester City and Liverpool in our predictions, just a little bit.
That's not necessarily true. It's more of that was the heart talking more than the brain. But.
And with mine, it was I honestly thought Manchester City was a better squad, just going through player by player. But I also didn't think both their center backs were going to get hurt halfway through the year. I didn't think that Pep was going to kind of not coach as well as he usually does. And I didn't think that they were going to have offensive issues outside of Kevin De Bruyne. So
I didn't expect Liverpool to have a 13-point lead with a game in hand.
Absolutely not.
Before the new year. So, no. Yeah, I mean, the season's over. It's over.
Oh, it's
absolutely the title's over.
I'm worried about the Invincibles. And people talk about the greatest teams in the history of English football, and my number one is the Invincibles. My number 2 greatest team, and I will argue this to the day I die, because if Tony Adams would have stayed sober, Arsenal would have gone undefeated under that team and would have had the most points in the history of English football, and would still have the most points in the history of English football. Is that early '90s team that Arsenal had that had Paul Merson and Anders Limpar and Alan Smith and Kevin Campbell and just this fantastic team. And they let in the fewest goals in the history of. Lee Dixon was in there. I can't remember who our other right back was. But this Steve Bold was on that team. It was just this really, really good team. Our David Seaman was our keeper. They at that point, and until Chelsea overtook us, we had the largest gap in the history of points, and that was with a 10-point deduction because Arsenal got into a fight with United. If Arsenal doesn't get into a fight with United and Tony Adams stays sober, or if Tony Adams stays sober, we probably don't get into a fight with Manchester United. We have it's statistically the best team until maybe this year. That team was just built to just dominate, and they should have done better in Europe. They disappointed in Europe, and Arsenal. One of the biggest disappointments is we didn't win the European Cup that year.
Champions League, yeah.
Yeah, and but we did win the FA Cup that year. That was a double year. We didn't win Carling Cup because we've always been bad in the Carrobo Cup. We've always been bad in the League Cup. But it was just it was the most dominant team up until Chelsea. And you ask anybody, that was the most dominant team. But yeah, and I know I'm discounting United's triple, and I'm discounting Chelsea's league and City from a couple years ago. But in my opinion, that my top two, and I have to give rid of that because I don't think Liverpool's losing this year. I just don't see them losing a single game this year. Now, if they lose,
I think they'll lose one.
If they do
lose one,
if they lose one, Arsenal Invincibles back the top best team ever because no one can do it.
I still don't think so. But
it just the way they were set up. Then they disappointed in every other league, but because they lost to you all in League Cup because of that stupid Giggs goal. They lost to Chelsea in Champions League, and they lost to Liverpool in FA Cup, and they should have won all three of those. Our problem was England. It was not, ironically enough, we didn't lose in England outside of in the league, but we lost in England in every other competition. But yeah, if Arsenal wins one more trophy, even with our point total, I don't think anyone argues that we're the best team in the history of English football. Because that team should have easily won. That team should have won Champions League. I mean, should have easily won Champions League. And Henry gets Player of the Year instead of Nedved. Or not Nedved. Who won that year?
Yeah.
Was it Nedved?
I don't remember.
It was oh god, I don't know. Whoever won that year was.
You mean the Ballon d'Or?
Yeah, I can't remember when the Ballon d'Or. It should have gone to Thierry Henry that year. Was it Shevchenko?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, it should have gone to Thierry Henry. It should have gone to Thierry Henry.
I think that you can't compare the teams. They have actually, it's just 9 more wins we're December 27th is when we're recording this. Liverpool need 9 more wins to equate to the same number of wins that the Invincibles had.
Yeah, but they just need one more loss to have more losses than they do. I just it's a very specific thing, and I do think Arsenal threw away points in order to try to achieve the Invincibles. And I will argue that to the day that, especially against Tottenham, we were up 2-0 against Tottenham, and we didn't care as long as we got a point. I do think that there was a lackadaisical nature, especially the second half, because the first half Arsenal was dominant. I think they had one of the highest total. I think they still have one of the highest totals in the history of English football for the first half. But I mean, we beat United at home. We beat Liverpool at home. Just second half we were not as dominant because we were kind of coasted, and I think that's more to do with Wenger than anything else. I just think that team is just ridiculous. But not to get on a rant about that, I kind of want to change the subject. I know you got stats to back up, but but I mean, Arsenal's we had significantly more points in the first half than the second half, and that's not there's no argument on that one. And that team was ridiculous. Just from front to back, that team was ridiculous. Yeah. The best team in Europe that year. I know we didn't win Champions League, but that team was the best team in Europe. And Barcelona fans have told me that just in forums. But Liverpool, I feel like are not going to lose this year, and that's just my opinion. And if they don't, I'm going to again argue that the Invincibles is the best team ever because I'm an Arsenal fan. That's just what I do. That's what we're supposed to do.
If they go 36-1-1. Is the Arsenal team that went 26-12-0 better?
Yes, because at least half of those draws were because we didn't care. We cared about not losing rather than winning. So, but
I mean,
but yeah, no, it's a different mentality when you don't want to lose versus when you.
It's almost 20 points higher though.
I don't care. It's a different mentality. But I don't think this Liverpool team is losing. That's again. I'm going to say that again. I don't think this Liverpool team is going to lose. I've been saying that, and I will keep saying that. I just don't think they're going to lose. Whereas Arsenal also didn't lose. But
I will bet you one beer
that this Liverpool team is going to lose.
That this Liverpool team will lose.
That's fine, but if it happens, I'm claiming Arsenal's the best team ever.
It's on the record now.
In European football. Or European and English football, and maybe even European. And that's not true.
Barcelona. In the league,
Yeah.
Liverpool will lose.
Yeah, Champions League's a different story. They actually already lost in Champions League to Napoli before they fired Carlo Ancelotti. But yeah, so we're going to skip over Liverpool. I know we talked about more than 1 and 2. Yeah, we're going to go to City and Leicester, which we had mixed up. Like, we had said that one team was going to dominate. We thought it was going to be Manchester City. It was Liverpool. But we said that 2 teams were going to be very close. We said that both of us had said it was going to be Tottenham and Liverpool. We were kind of right. Second and third are very close. They're Leicester and Manchester City.
Well, the squad finally gave up on Pochettino at Tottenham, and I think that was coming.
We'll get to Tottenham in a second. We're right now just talking about Leicester and United or City, and like I think they're there to stay. They're significantly better than everybody else.
I think they're there to stay because their squads are better than everybody else, not necessarily because their managing has been better or their.
I think Brendan Rodgers is an underrated manager, and Pep is Pep. Brendan Rodgers is the guy I did not want managing Arsenal, by the way.
I don't want Brendan Rodgers managing Leicester either, or managing United either. So.
Yeah. I can't hear it. But no, Brendan Rodgers is. That's terrible.
I don't think he's that great. I honestly just don't.
He's doing.
I think Leicester's been underachieving for a couple of years since they won the title.
But I guess my statement is, and I will give myself credit. I did say between Wolves and Leicester was the team that scared me more about getting in the top 4. I did say that. I'm on record to say that. Go listen to the last podcast. I did predict.
Wolves are 5th, so not that far off. But.
Yeah, but Wolves aren't top 4. Are they still 5th?
They're 5th.
I thought they were 7th.
They're above United.
Then they're 6th.
They're 5th.
5th is Tottenham.
No, they're 5th.
Are they 5th?
6th is Tottenham.
Oh shit. Okay, I apologize.
Yep.
But Leicester's 3rd and they're 2nd, and there's nobody close to them outside of Manchester City. They're gonna finish top 4. Like they're going to finish top 4.
Yeah, I think so. I think that City has a chance to slide, but I don't see it being super likely.
No,
I also think Chelsea has a chance.
I guess
to
what
slide.
I was going with
Wolves
is
and Spurs. So
I guess what I was going with is just kind of funny that we did predict that 2nd and 3rd were going to be a huge gap between 2nd and 3rd and 4th, and there was going to be a battle for 4th between multiple teams, and we were right.
There is now, but it's just not the teams we saw.
Yeah. Though if we would have said Liverpool City thing was not that far off, if we would have chose the other team, it would be fine.
We definitely didn't expect Sheffield United.
Oh hell no, no, Sheffield's part of the conversation of the next thing. So it's just kind of interesting, and I do think that City will buy a defender, or at least pay big money for a defender on loan, because they have nobody healthy. They're playing Fernandinho on the midfield. And by the way, Rodri has been fantastic on that team. He's been great. Great buy. Cancelo hasn't seen the field, so we don't know if he'll be a good buy yet. But, yeah, City's done fine. And Leicester, everybody they purchased is excellent. So, again, should be on Arsenal. Was offered to Arsenal for less than what Leicester City paid, and they got him. Dennis Payet has been fantastic when he came off the bench. He was a guy that Arsenal didn't bid enough money for. Like, not to bring Arsenal too far, because I'm Arsenal heart. But, yeah, just so... Like, they just do really well in the transfer market, and just great squad, and Brendan Rodgers doing at least well enough. They're going to make Champions League, not even question. They may finish 2nd. They may finish 2nd this year. And like especially if City wants to win Champions League, which I think they're going to stop concentrating on the Premier League and just start going for Champions League very soon. But yeah, so outside of those, you have a huge fight for 4th place. Right now, Chelsea's in there. Tottenham. You mentioned Wolves, United, Sheffield. They're all within striking distance. Even Arsenal, to an extent, is within striking distance, even though we're 11th in the table, because we're only 8 points back. And if everybody else kind of has a bad streak, Arsenal could be there. And Chelsea right now is having a bad streak, and I could see them continuing on. my issue with Chelsea is they're young and they don't have a lot of depth. And I worry that the people they're going to buy are not going to be the proper people for their team because I don't think they're going to buy anybody that fits that team better than their young players. Their young players have been absolutely outstanding. We didn't say this on the podcast, but we did. We texted afterwards or before about, or even talked in person. I think actually we talked in person about it. How Chelsea's young players could be the best thing for them. The transfer ban could be amazing.
The transfer ban,
and it was great. Kurt Zuma showed up fantastic. I can't remember the rest of their center backs. All their center backs are great. Kovacic, they bought Kovacic instead of going after another midfielder, and he's been excellent. Jorginho's been awesome. Jorginho's been awesome. But they would have gone after somebody other than Kovacic because he wasn't great last year.
Hudson-Odoi wouldn't have gotten the opportunity.
No.
Tammy Abraham.
No, neither would Coach.
I'd take Abraham right now.
Oh, absolutely. I questioned Abraham. That was on me. I was wrong. Abraham has been amazing. He's been so good that they're going to get rid of Olivier Giroud apparently on the and buy a backup forward. They're not actually looking for a starting forward anymore for him.
There you go. Sell him Aubameyang.
Yeah. No, that won't work. They won't pay that much for Aubameyang. But no. So yeah, Chelsea's transfer ban was actually good for them. But the problem with it is the young players is they get tired and they need breaks and you need depth and like. With older players, you kind of you monitor them, you'll give them games off, you'll change formation, you'll do that kind of stuff. With younger players, you're like, oh, they can play all the time. They can't, and so you're starting to see that with Chelsea. And I feel like they're going to overexert their midfield and overexert their front line because they just don't have the depth that they do. William's the one player William and Mason Mount are the two players that kind of keep and they'll take Pulisic out, but Pulisic will get tired. And Mount will as well. But Williams the one guy that they're getting very cautious with, and I feel like they're going to count on him a little too much to the end of the season. And I worry
all the teams, basically all the teams from like 4th through 11th. Just throwing you guys in.
You don't need to.
Well, I think there's still a chance.
Yeah.
I don't see Crystal Palace or Newcastle climbing up there, so I'm really just going 4th to 8th, and then Arsenal. But I just don't think that there's any team there that is really solid depth-wise. And there's just so
Tottenham
much.
has probably got the best chance of anybody, and that's only because that team is built for Mourinho.
Mourinho's gone and determined to get rid of Eriksen, though.
I'm not even worried about Eriksen, though. Like, Eriksen's not his type of player, though. His type of players are counterattacking players, and with Son, by the way, who's a total
He has played.
asshole.
I looked at this earlier. Eriksen's played a total of 105 minutes in like 7 games since Mourinho's.
Yeah. He's just not his kind of player. I mean, he's a player that Mourinho would maybe use if he was a full-time coach, but he wouldn't be a starter. I mean, he likes the counter. He likes to counterattack, and it's what he's always done. And with Kane, with Son, with Dele Alli, like that's what he does. And Lucas Moura coming off the bench, now Lucas Moura starting because Son is just an awful person.
I just don't think he's utilizing Eriksen because he'd be amazing in that. I mean, what the rumor is Eriksen the United.
I'm gonna. This has been going on for a long time. We're getting close to it, so I'm gonna like cut off a little bit. I just wanna. Mourinho's gonna be great, and Mourinho's been great for them. I really do feel like top 4. Tottenham's gonna finish that top 4 slot. I don't
think so.
I'm going to give you the opportunity because I've already made a prediction to make your prediction for top 4, and then after that we're going to do a golden boot again. If you want to readjust your golden boot, which you can, I'm not going to, and then we're going to sign off because it's getting a little late. So
I think top 4 stays how it is. I think Chelsea finishes at 4th.
Okay.
I think that golden boot is probably going to just stick with Vardy.
Yeah. I can understand that. I'm going to
see
stick with
any
Aubameyang.
reason for Leicester to sell anybody that they have. So all their players that are getting linked with moves, they're not going to move till the summer. Leicester's kind of going all in on Champions League, and I think that's where the golden boot lies.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Aubameyang just because I predicted him. If I had a second prediction, I would have said Vardy, but Aubameyang is in second. I have reasons for it, but it doesn't really matter. If we sell him, I'm going to switch to Vardy. But this has been fantastic, Andy. Thank you for coming on for our podcast. We'll do one at the end of the year. We may do another one. We'll discuss it. But yeah, thank you all for listening, and sign off. Andy, sign off.
Oh shit! Sorry, my bad. We're gonna leave that in.
Yeah. I don't edit.
So long.
This is punk rock.
Nice.
So yeah, Andy says goodbye. So thank you.
Later, dudes.